Hi, this is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today with this bucket of snow, we are going to paint some gray full circle roving from Knit Picks. We are going to paint 200 grams using Wilton's food coloring and a squirt bottle that we'll use to draw some pattern on top of the snow. For this project, you will also need some kind of either like a window screen or a cookie sheet, a bowl to collect the drip through. We will be doing this in the bathtub. Eventually you will need plastic wrap and a microwave safe plate. You will also need an acid source. We will be using distilled white vinegar. I've started by filling this bucket of water with 6 to 8 cups of cool water. It's really just approximate. And I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And stir this up. This is where I am going to pre-soak the roving, so that way it has acid in it to help the food coloring bind to it. I'm now going to take my rovings out and carefully submerge them in the water. We will want to make sure that the water, that the fibers get totally saturated. But we have another consideration here. Although I'm starting with, not cold water, but cool water, I don't want to shock my fibers when I add the snow on top of them. So once we have these fibers submerged, I'm actually going to put this in the fridge so they continue soaking and slowly cool down. See, I wasn't kidding. I really did stick it in my fridge. I've filled my squirt bottle with just over a 1/4 cup of water. Plain water, no vinegar. I'm going to be using a squirt bottle to kind of paint the snow because with the other snow dyeing I've done, I've added dry Kool-Aid to the top and allowed that to soak through. So I don't want, when I add the dye to the snow, for that to immediately melt the snow. That will totally slow down the application. And I know I can cause just drops to come out of this tip. So hopefully that will work. Now, I've never measured the amount of Wilton's violet that I have taken out, but I know that I want a reasonable amount of dye. So that's the lid. Ha! It's been a while since I've used this. So I'm going to just take my chopstick and get a good, that's black, so you can't, there we go. I'm going to take my chopstick and get a good healthy coating and take this and swirl it in the bottle. Still mostly, I'll add more water if I need to, and I might do a second dip with a second chopstick to not double dip in my dye. Okay, I'm also going to kind of scrape this out on the side. Oh, actually, it does look like a lot of the dye is on that, just some has kind of gone into the wood. I've never used wood on one of these before. I usually use plastic. So, there we go. You see that? That looks like most of it has gone into the container. I'm going to go ahead and do a second dip with a second chopstick. Kind of just swirl that around. Get a good healthy coat. Sort of twirl it to stop the drip and stick it in the water. I'm going to close this up and wipe it off. Okay, but that seems to be fine. I am wearing gloves, not because anything that we're dealing with today is dangerous, but because I want to protect my own skin. Kind of scraping this on the side because I can also shake this container after I've added it. Science, right guys? So I've only used snow to dye once, and the result was gorgeous and really fun, but I already knew from the get-go that this is an effect that I think I would like better on roving, because then I could take these, like the variations and the patches that remained white and stuff, and really make that cool. Most of the dye is off there. I knew that I would be able to take these variations that you get from when the snow binds, and like any white patches, or in this case they will be gray patches, and really get something cool out of it when I spin. So I don't know if you noticed, but I just wiped the excess dye off around the rim, put on the top of the bottle, and now we're just going to give it a good shake, because I did add some dye up around the rim. But I don't care that the application is particularly even. I just want, because you know, a clump of dye on the snow would still produce something really cool. So there, I've now got my food coloring mixed, and I am going to take this and put this in the fridge, because since I'm going to be adding liquid this time, I don't want this to melt the snow as fast, so I am going to chill it down. Alright, the fiber is good and soaked, and now I am going to take it out of where it was soaking from. I guess you might not be able to see me. Drain, gently drain some of this excess water and vinegar. And now lay the fiber out on my cookie sheet. Now the mistake I made was not, there we go, undoing the knot that held it together. But wow, look how much it shrunk. Hopefully it's not felted from being so cold. You know, this definitely counts as a dyeing experiment. I have not ever treated fiber like this. So, you know, we will see what we end up with. Now, if I learned anything from the last time, I want the fiber to be spread out, but I also want to have as few holes going through the bottom as possible, because I don't want the dye dripping through to have an easy path down. The bowl underneath it is really just to catch some of the waste water, so you see what we did. Okay. This is still tied off. There we go. I did not untie that at the beginning. These are really not being put on in any ordered fashion. Huh, funny. I never dyed 2 hanks of fiber or skeins of yarn at the same time in the same colorway before. So this is actually new and different for many reasons. Okay. I think this one might be damper than that one, but I think that's okay. Because maybe when I spin this, I'll spin each side separately and then ply them together. That would be pretty cool. But alright, I've got my fiber all laid out, and now it's time to cover it up with some snow. Now I collected this snow last night before I went to bed. So it's not as fluffy as it was when I collected it. Oops. So I might need to break it up a bit to cover the edges. But remarkably, it stayed pretty cold in my back hall. Anyone want to have a snowball fight? So one thing I thought about earlier that is different from this, I've heard about ice dyeing before. I've never tried it, but I think one main difference between dyeing with ice and dyeing with snow is I'm able to get a pretty complete cover with the snow. If you're dyeing with powder, I've seen beautiful results from putting it on top of ice cubes. But I wonder what would happen if instead of dyeing with powder, if you were trying to dye with liquid with just ice, I think that it would just flow over the ice and go straight onto the yarn. You might get some cool patterning, but with the more like access to the fiber, I don't know if you would get the slowed delivery. So what are we hoping to get out of this? I'm hoping, well, the snow is a lot denser. So this is also an example of snow dyeing with like a wetter, heavier snow versus the powder I used yesterday. So, you know, there's probably some holes in this already, but you can see it looks like we've got a pretty dense sheet of snow going on. So I'm hoping that we'll see two things. I'm hoping that we'll see some cool breaking of color. I'm also hoping that we'll get good penetration of the color and it'll show up off of the gray. Now this is something that's a little hard to know how it will work out right now because the gray fiber got a lot darker when wet. So we can't predict. So wow, with this wet snow, oh, my hands are getting really cold. I'm using almost the entire bucket, whereas last night I used only a small amount of the powder. I think that it was easier to cover with powder than it is to cover like this. So anyway, our fiber is now completely covered in snow. It's now time to add the dye. We've got our squirt bottle, and as much as I can, I want to get, I can go faster than that, I want to get reasonable coverage. So I'm just starting slow. Speeding up. This is kind of fun. Getting some around over the edges, but not like a ton. But anyone want a snow cone? I'm suddenly having this like big craving for a snow cone. I can't, whoops, lost some dye to the tub. I can't imagine why I would be wanting a snow cone around now. So the nice thing here is with my snow so dense, I thought that I was going to have to be really careful and apply just like small drops. But looks like that isn't actually the case. Hopefully I'm not leaning in front of the video. That adding these squirts is looking like it's actually pretty fine. I'm expecting there to be some white around the edges, but I do want to try to get some decent coverage in this middle area, because that's where most of the fiber is. But you can definitely see some pitting start, okay, contrast-wise it's hard to see. There's definitely some pitting. If I stick my finger in, maybe it shows it better, from where I've added the dye. Absolutely some pitting, but again, that is totally reasonable. I think I've got enough snow on there that I think that it should like not have gone just immediately straight through. The one thing I am concerned about is that I don't have enough vinegar in the fiber. But what are the worst case scenarios? That I've shocked the fiber too much and so that the fiber is felted. That's a pretty bad scenario. Another bad scenario would be that when all the snow melts, there's beautiful fiber. I let it warm up to room temperature slowly. I heat it, and I lose all my beauty, all my beautiful color, and you know, it all just comes out of the fiber. But again, we'll see what we get. I have high hopes, and I will come back periodically and show you what our snow bath looks like. Look at how much paler and diffuse the dye has gotten after even just about not even 15 minutes yet. This is soaking in much faster. But the fun thing that I would like to point out is that we even have a tiny bit of color separation, or so it looks, even just in the snow. Now, with the paper towel, if you put a paper towel over the violet food coloring, you will see like a blue halo. But you can see little patches of blue and some that are way more pink. So I really wonder how this will go in on the fiber. The first time I hand painted fiber, I used some Wilton's Violet, and even just from applying it to the yarn that was pre-soaked in vinegar, I got breaking and separation immediately. So I'm wondering what this kind of application will do to the fiber. But we are currently about 50 minutes into the melting of the snow. And look how much pink there now is on top. This is kind of the opposite of the way the space dyeing usually goes, because the pink will absorb the fastest and the blue travels. But it looks like when we're dealing with melting ice that it seems to be the reverse. So I think that we could end up with some really, really cool colors. 2 hours in, and there is definitely color separation. Now, whether this is going to be striking the fiber differently, I don't know. But look at it. You see all this pink on top, and the blue is moving through way faster. This is so cool and looks really, really pretty. We're now almost 4 hours in, and you can see that there is a lot of snow left, unlike last night. But the volume of snow we started with was way greater. Now, some of the edges are coming exposed, and I do see some hints of pink in there. Now that's a color I think that would stand out more from the gray. But actually back there I do see some bluish. So, there's definitely color going in. Whether it's going in all the way to the bottom, I don't know yet. The other thing of concern is that the bowl underneath will fill up and then start soaking the fiber from beneath with the dye that has already dripped through. I'm not going to worry about this yet. I checked and the bowl is maybe only half full. So maybe in another hour or so I will pull it out. But ooh, it's chilly in here. We are almost 5 hours in, and there is no doubt that there is some dye in the fiber. You can even, well, at least there's pink dye in the fiber. We see some gray portions. There's some cool holes in the ice too. But it's a little unclear how much blue has penetrated or if it has just gone through. The other thing that's interesting is see all those little red dots? When I've been wondering if dye has been crashing out, I don't know why it would crash out here because it wasn't in acidic conditions. Maybe there's just some red particles inside some of Wilton's food coloring. and it's not meant to be completely dissolved. All right, we're at 5 hours and 40 minutes. And when I look at the bits of fiber that's exposed, I don't really see blue area. I see mostly pink. It looks like some areas are even, less wet than they were before and might be completely gray. Now let's take a look gently at the bowl. The bowl is bright blue, even purple. So what I'm wondering if what's happening is that the blue is just going completely through the fiber. Now I'm glad we have this saved because we could potentially use this exact same dye to dye over what we've got. But what I'm wondering is if the pink is just striking to the fiber so fast with maybe like whatever little vinegar's left, but the blue just goes through and without heat, with it so cold, it's just not sticking. I mean, the blue did stick when I did it with Kool-Aid, but the citric acid was contained. Maybe I needed more vinegar. Again, we don't know that no blue stuck. This is just my theory from now. And of course, the areas that I can see are the areas that would have had the least exposure to dye because that melted first and that's what dripped over the edge. 7 hours in, and I'm noticing something a little interesting. You see a lot more dryness in the roving that's over here versus over there. The one on the right had a lot more water in it when we started than the one on the left. And I'm just checking. Yep, the bowl still seems to be fine with the amount of water in it. So the baby's napping in the next room, which is why I'm whispering. So we should be good to go. All right, it's been 10 hours and I'm feeling a little bored waiting for these last few bits to finish melting. So I'm gonna call it 10 hours and this is done. And now let's take a look and see what we've got. I see a lot of pink on the surface. And I see some hints that might be blue, but it's hard to tell with the wet and drier patches of the wet gray. It looks like right there we've got some blue and maybe in some other spots. But let's flip this over. Let's see. I'm flipping this over as straight as I can. Okay. Alright, so this is some of the reverse side on a microwave safe plate. And I do see what I believe to be some blue in the middle and some streaks. And I also see a lot of area that looks pretty plain and gray. It's pretty plain and gray. All of those red patches appear to be on the top of the roving. So that's all on this side. I'm placing all of the roving onto this microwave safe plate and it's still pretty cold. So, sorry for blocking. Well, this looks like to have a reasonable amount of blue. But look at how bright that dye is. So a lot went through. We won't know entirely how much blue absorbed into the fiber until we've washed and let it dry. But the fiber is still really cold. So I don't want to put it in the microwave right now because I would really shock the fibers. Instead, I'm gonna set it aside and slowly let it warm up. And then if it still feels cool to the touch rather than room temperature, I'll let it sit overnight. Otherwise, I will nuke it for 2 minutes in the microwave after I've wrapped the top with saran wrap. But for now, we're gonna let it sit and warm up. Now as for this dye, I am going to save it. Why would I save it? Well, just in case I want to do some over dyeing later. I have a feeling that this pretty blue might come in handy. So I'm going to put it in some Tupperware and save it and potentially use it later on. You definitely see some blue in here. The fiber's still pretty cool. So I brought it into the kitchen to warm up a bit slowly. And this could be really amazing. Or I could be a little disappointed. Ah, the suspense is killing me. I ended up heating the fiber for 3 minutes total in the microwave. I did 1 minute intervals until it was hot to touch. And now I am going to let it cool down overnight because I'm going to bed. It's time for the moment of truth when I add my cooled off fiber into the rinse bath. I'm adding just 100 grams right now to some lukewarm water. And while that's promising, the water seems to be totally clear and nothing seems to be coming out. I'm going to add some gentle dish soap. There's some darkening, tiny bit. Okay, but I'm gonna very gently wash this fiber. I'm not gonna want to run the water directly on it. I'm going to have a series of baths that I will let it soak in, remove, rinse, repeat. And when I'm done with this one, I will do the same thing with the other 100 grams. Then I'll hang them up to dry. But there is no question, looking at this, I have some really gorgeous looking blue, like right here by my finger. But it's still wet, and I know that the color will get a lot lighter after this is done drying. Oh, I picked this up and see all that purple color that is now in the bath. We want to make sure that this will run clear. But we do know, may as well let you see the fiber. I do know that we saw some pink residue on top of the fiber that, I guess I'd been saying that, oh, the red crashed out, but I think it's just pink particulates that are in the food coloring itself. So I'm going to want to keep rinsing until we get no color in the water. Hopefully that will mean that there will be some color left in the fiber. Well, folks, I think we can say that we certainly broke Wilton's violet food coloring in this snow dyeing experiment. Let's take a closer look at the unbraided fiber. I don't really see any purple anywhere. So what we saw with the snow was a little bit of the opposite of what we see when we've dyed with Wilton's food coloring, in that the blue moved faster, and so the blue actually hit the fiber first before the red. But this is really pretty fiber, but I think that I might want to over dye it. I kind of want some more purple in here, so maybe I'll have to do another dyeing experiment where I will start with this fiber and over dye it in Wilton's purple, in a not really trying to break it kind of way, but in a let's cover these gray bits with some actual purple tones. I am really pleased with how it came out, especially because I did start with a darker tone of fiber. I think if it were white fiber, I might have been a little disappointed by how much white space there is. I do think that things would have been a bit easier if I had had a screen versus using a cooling rack. But ultimately, I'd say the experiment was a success. you can break Wilton's violet food coloring by snow dyeing. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you for sticking with me for this dyeing experiment.